You ever been kind to someone, genuinely, wholeheartedly, and they still treated you like the villain? You ever showed up with love, patience, and grace, only to be met with cold shoulders, fake smiles, and betrayal that cut deep? That's the kind of pain people don't talk about enough. The kind of confusion that'll make you sit in your car with your head down, asking yourself, what did I do wrong? But let me tell you something powerful right now. It's not always about what you did. Sometimes your light offends the darkness they refuse to deal with. Your kindness, your peace, your heart. It exposes their bitterness, their insecurity, their fear. And instead of healing, they attack. Not because you harmed them, but because your spirit reminds them of everything they're not ready to become. And I know it hurts. I know it feels unfair. But don't you ever let their brokenness break your goodness. Your kindness is not weakness. Your compassion is not a flaw. It is your strength. It is your calling. And no amount of hate can drown the power of a soul that chooses to love anyway. So let's talk about it. Let's break this down. Why do people hate you, even when you're kind? Do you ever notice how the more you show kindness, the colder some people get toward you? It's like the nicer you are, the more uncomfortable they become. But it ain't your kindness that's the problem. It's their insecurity that's flaring up in the presence of it. See, when someone's walking around with wounds they never healed, kindness feels like salt. Not because you meant harm, but because you touched something they buried. You come with peace, but they live in war. You speak with gentleness, but their mind is filled with noise. And when they see you smiling with no hidden agenda, it exposes the fact that their smile always came with strings. That's what they can't handle. Your presence brings a truth they've been running from. That they've forgotten how to love purely, how to trust deeply, how to give without expecting something back. And so instead of admiring your kindness, they punish it, they mock it, they twist it into weakness, because that's easier than facing their own brokenness. But listen to me. That's not about you. That's a battle they're fighting within, and you just happen to be standing in the crossfire. You didn't cause the storm, you're just reminding them what calm looks like. People who live in insecurity see everything through the lens of fear. So when you're kind, they don't feel safe. They feel threatened. Because your kindness doesn't play by their rules. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't scheme. It doesn't come with a mask. And that kind of purity, to someone who's only known love through conditions, feels suspicious. They start thinking, what do you want from me? Because they've never known someone who just wanted to see them happy. That's the tragedy of this world. Too many people expect a price for peace. A catch behind compassion. And when you show up just being you, genuine, caring, present, they can't comprehend it. It doesn't fit into the framework of their experience. So instead of receiving it, they reject it. They question your motives, try to find flaws in your character, because accepting your kindness would mean admitting that they've lived life guarded for no reason. And that's a hard truth to swallow. So they push you away, not because you're wrong, but because you're too right. Not because you did something, but because you didn't do what they expected. You didn't betray, you didn't lie, you didn't leave. And that confuses the hell out of them. Your kindness is like a light, and light always reveals. Not just the good, but the clutter, the cracks, the damage people hoped no one would notice. And when you walk in the room carrying love, it casts a spotlight on the things they tried to hide in the dark. That's why they act out. That's why they get distant, sarcastic, defensive. It's not because you hurt them, it's because you see them. Really see them. And that level of visibility is terrifying when you've spent your whole life building walls. Most people don't want to be seen, they want to be admired from a distance, controlled in how they're perceived. But your kindness looks past the mask. It touches the soul. And when someone ain't ready for that, they'll hate you just for trying. They'll say you're too much, too soft, too emotional, not realizing that it's not you who's too much, it's them who's too empty. And instead of filling themselves up, they try to drain you. Because misery doesn't want company. It wants control. And if it can't control you, it'll criticize you until you question who you are. See, we live in a world that celebrates the loud, the harsh, the distant. People are taught that if you're not tough, you'll be torn apart. So when you come along choosing kindness over cruelty, softness over sarcasm, you don't fit the mold. And anything that doesn't fit gets feared. They don't know where to place you. You don't fight back the way they expect. You don't gossip when they provoke you. You don't curse when they insult you. You keep showing love. You keep holding your ground without lowering your standards. And that's maddening to someone who was hoping to break your spirit. It's frustrating to someone who's counting on you to stoop down to their level, because if you did, they could justify their behavior. But when you don't, when you rise, when you respond with grace, they have to sit with the fact that they're the one choosing bitterness. And some folks would rather hate you than heal themselves. That's the truth. They'll hate your light because it makes their darkness harder to ignore. They'll hate your love because it reminds them of how unloved they feel inside. It's not that your kindness is the problem, it's that they never learn how to receive it. Somewhere along the way, life taught them that love hurts, that trust ends in betrayal, that every soft word is a setup for pain. And now they walk around armored, guarded, suspicious of every good thing. So when you walk into their life with open hands and a full heart, they don't see a blessing, they see a threat, because to receive your kindness would mean taking off their armor. And that's something they haven't done in years, maybe ever. They hate you because in their eyes, you're asking too much of them, asking them to feel again, to hope again, to believe again. And for someone who's lived in survival mode, that feels impossible. They don't hate you because you're unkind. They hate you because your kindness asks them to become someone they don't believe they can be. But you got to remember, you're not responsible for their healing. You're responsible for staying true to your nature. And if your nature is kind, then keep being kind, even if it makes the broken uncomfortable. Some people are so used to fighting that they see love as an enemy. They've been lied to so many times that the truth feels foreign. They've been abandoned so often that presence feels suspicious. And the minute you offer them something real, your loyalty, your compassion, your honesty, they flinch. They doubt it, they reject it, because they don't trust good things to stay. They expect the rug to be pulled. So rather than let you close, they push you away before you can leave. It's self-sabotage disguised as self-protection. And deep down, they don't hate you. They hate what you represent. You represent a world they don't think they deserve, a peace they've never known, a version of love that doesn't hurt. And facing that is more painful than pretending it doesn't exist. So they lash out, they attack, they lie, they twist your intentions, not because you did wrong, but because you did right, and they don't know how to receive it. And that's the tragic part. You offered water to someone drowning in salt, and they curse you for not letting them sink. But don't carry guilt for being a healer. Your kindness is a gift. And even if they reject it, it still matters. It still has value. It still has power. You ever notice how the more patient you are, the more some people try to test your limits? Like the softer you speak, the louder they get. The more understanding you are, the more they push you just to see how far they can go. That's what happens when people mistake your goodness for weakness. They think because you don't snap back, you don't feel. Because you don't fight dirty, you can't fight at all. But let me tell you something. It takes strength to stay calm when chaos is screaming in your face. It takes courage to hold your peace when everything in you wants to react. And people who don't know that kind of discipline, that kind of self-control, they'll never understand it. So they interpret your grace as softness, your kindness as surrender, and your forgiveness as fear. They assume you're weak simply because you refuse to meet them in the mud. But what they don't see is that you're not staying silent because you're afraid. You're staying silent because you've already mastered the noise. You've learned that peace is power. And some people will hate you for it because they can't stand a soul that doesn't crumble under pressure. See, some folks grew up in a world where love was loud, aggressive, conditional, where being good-hearted meant being taken advantage of. So now when they meet someone like you, steady, patient, and giving, they assume you're someone they can control. They think your goodness is a green light to overstep, to disrespect, to take more than they ever planned to give. But what they fail to realize is that goodness isn't a weakness, it's a choice, a powerful one. It takes strength to keep your character intact when others are losing theirs. It takes resilience to continue treating people right when they treat you wrong. But they don't see that. They see someone who won't curse them out and think they'll never stand up for themselves. They see someone who forgives and think, I can keep hurting them, they'll stay. But oh, if they only knew the storms you've endured just to stay soft. If they only knew how many times you've had to rebuild your peace from scratch. You're not weak, you're wise. You just know that not every battle deserves your energy. The sad truth is, this world is quicker to praise the ones who bark loud than the ones who walk quietly in power. And because you're not out here flexing your strength, people assume you don't have any. But you've got a power they'll never understand. A power rooted in peace, grounded in patience, covered in self-respect. They mistake that quiet dignity for passiveness, but it's not passiveness, it's purpose. You're intentional with your energy. You don't throw punches just to prove you can hit. You don't raise your voice just to fill the silence. You move with care because you know what chaos costs. And when someone hasn't done the inner work, when they're still operating out of fear, control, and ego, they look at your composure and call it weakness. Because to them, strength means domination. To them, power is loud. But your strength isn't for show. It's not performative. It's tested, it's lived in. And the more you keep being good, the more it confuses them. Because you're everything they can't manipulate. You're the kind of person they can't mold into their mess. There's a certain kind of cruelty that shows up when someone thinks you won't fight back. They'll test you in ways they'd never dare test someone they fear. And that's the burden of being good in a world that values toughness over tenderness. They'll speak to you in ways they wouldn't dare speak to someone who doesn't tolerate it. They'll try to drain you, control you, dismiss you, all because they think you won't say no. But what they don't know is that you've said yes for so long just to give them a chance. Not because you couldn't walk away, but because you believed in grace. You gave room for growth. You held on when others would have let go. And that's not weakness, that's rare strength. That's love, that's patience. That's a soul rooted in something deeper than pride. But the moment they cross that line one too many times, the strength they never saw will speak. It won't scream. It won't curse. It'll walk. Quiet, final, unapologetic. And that's when they realize they never understood your goodness in the first place. They never saw the lion beneath the lamb. People like you are rare. The world doesn't quite know what to do with someone who's both kind and powerful. So they try to put you in a box. They either want you to be soft and silent forever, or strong and aggressive like everyone else. But you're neither. You're both. You're a calm force. And because they can't categorize you, they try to discredit you. They call your compassion weakness because that's easier than admitting they lack it. They try to dim your light because standing next to you makes their shadows harder to ignore. And it's not your job to prove them wrong. It's not your duty to show teeth every time they provoke you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not react. Just keep showing up as you are. Keep living in truth, because eventually people reveal themselves. And while they're out here playing games, you're building peace. While they're testing your limits, you're guarding your purpose. And one day they'll look around and realize the person they thought was weak was actually the one holding the foundation together. But by then, you'll be gone. Too powerful to be kept small any longer. When people misunderstand your goodness, it's not your failure, it's their limitation. They haven't reached a level of healing where they can recognize strength and kindness. They haven't grown enough to realize that turning the other cheek isn't cowardice, it's clarity. You don't match their hate because you don't need to. You don't retaliate because you understand your peace isn't worth trading for a moment of revenge. But they'll keep trying you, thinking your calm is an invitation to disrespect, thinking your forgiveness means you'll never walk away. And that's when your quiet strength shows up. That's when you do what they never expected. You remove yourself. With no explanation, no argument, no final word, just distance, just silence, just strength. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't prove anything. It just moves. And when you move, the same people who called you weak will realize they lost the strongest person they ever knew. Not because you fought, but because you didn't need to. You were never weak. You were just good. And not everybody knows what to do with that. Do you ever walk into a room and feel the shift before you even speak, like your presence alone disrupts the energy? You don't got to say a word, don't got to raise your voice, don't even have to make a scene, yet somehow people start side-eyeing, whispering, pulling away. You wonder, why? What did I do? But deep down you know. It's because you carry a light they can't explain. A light that doesn't brag, doesn't boast, doesn't seek approval, but still shines loud enough to be noticed. And not everybody knows how to handle that. See, when you've done the work, when you've healed, when you've grown, when you walk with peace instead of pride, it unsettles people who haven't found that yet. Your light doesn't ask for permission, it just shows up. And that kind of authenticity exposes every mask in the room. So don't be surprised when your peace agitates the insecure, when your joy annoys the bitter, when your presence feels like pressure to the ones hiding their pain. Because sometimes people don't hate you. They hate that they can't ignore you. You're a mirror to everything they've avoided, and rather than face it, they turn away. Not because you're wrong, but because you're real. The light you carry isn't loud. It's not the kind that screams for attention or begs to be liked. It's quiet, it's steady. It's built from pain, from healing, from nights you cried yourself to sleep and still got up the next morning with purpose in your chest. It's the kind of light that doesn't flicker when things get dark, it glows harder. And people who haven't found that kind of light in themselves, they don't know what to do with it in you. So they try to dim it, they try to make you question it, they say you've changed, say you think you're better, say you're distant now, when the truth is you just outgrew the darkness they're still clinging to. You started choosing peace over drama, silence over gossip, boundaries over people pleasing, and that threatens them because your growth challenges their comfort. Your light reminds them they could evolve too, but they haven't. And rather than rise, they'd rather resent. But don't you ever let their discomfort convince you to shrink. You didn't fight your way out of the dark just to go back and fit in. Your light was earned. Let it shine. You're the kind of person who brings clarity without speaking, just your energy is enough to shift the atmosphere. And people who thrive in confusion don't like that. They prefer mess, prefer noise, prefer masks. Because the moment you bring your light, everything fake starts falling apart. Suddenly, the things they've been hiding don't feel so hidden. The lies they believed about themselves don't feel so convincing. And instead of saying, thank you for helping me see, they get defensive, they reject you, attack you, distance themselves. Because your light reveals, and not everybody is ready to be seen. Some folks are more comfortable in the shadows, and that's not your fault. You didn't force them into the dark, you just refused to stay there. And now your existence makes them question theirs. That's heavy, that's lonely sometimes, but it's also sacred. Because what you carry can't be bought. It's not about looks, titles, or popularity. It's something eternal. Something divine. And when the world can't define it, it tries to destroy it. But it can't. Because light like yours was made to last, made to guide, made to rise, no matter how dark it gets. The hardest part about having a light they can't understand is that you start feeling guilty for shining. You start dimming yourself in conversations. You water down your passion. You second guess your joy. All because you don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. But let me tell you something. You were never meant to be small. That light inside you is not just for you, it's for every soul still searching in the dark. It's for the ones who feel alone, feel unseen, feel like giving up. When they see you, see how you still choose love, how you still choose truth, how you still walk with grace despite the pain. You give them hope, and that matters. That saves people. But if you keep shrinking, they'll never know it's possible. So stop apologizing for the way you shine. Stop over-explaining your heart. You're not too much. They're just not ready. And that's okay. Some people will only understand your light after they've fought through their own darkness. You can't speed that up for them. You can only keep shining quietly, boldly, without shame. Sometimes the people you want to love the most are the ones who turn away from your light the fastest. It hurts, doesn't it? You try to bring healing and they bring hostility. You try to bring peace and they bring problems. And you start questioning, is it me? But no, it's not you. It's what you represent. You represent wholeness in a place where they still feel broken. You represent freedom while they still feel trapped. And loving you means confronting everything they've been running from. That's why they pull back. That's why they act cold, distant, angry, because it's easier to blame you than face themselves. But please, don't take that personally. Don't turn your light off just to fit into their shadow. You were never meant to lead small just to make others comfortable. You're here to lead, not with your words, but with your life, with your choices, with your spirit. And if they can't see the beauty in that yet, it doesn't make it any less valuable. Some lights are only appreciated once they're gone. But you keep shining anyway. Even if they walk away, even if they never say thank you, shine, because it's who you are. You carry something powerful, something most people pray for, but don't recognize when it's right in front of them. You carry a light born out of storms, built in silence, molded in pain, refined in rejection. That kind of light can't be copied. It can't be taught in a classroom or earned through applause. It comes from surviving what should have broken you, from forgiving when you had every right to hate, from choosing integrity when nobody was watching. And that intimidates people. Because when you walk with that kind of light, you don't need to play games. You don't need to impress. You just are. And that kind of authenticity, it disrupts the fake. It unsettles the proud. It exposes what's hollow. So of course they misunderstand you. Of course they throw shade. Of course they make you the villain. But that's not your truth. Your truth is in how you love, how you give, how you rise. And no amount of confusion or criticism can take that from you. So walk in your light, stand in it, live in it, because no matter who doesn't understand it, you were made to shine. And nothing, not fear, not hate, not envy, can put that out. You ever wonder why people get so uncomfortable around you, even when you've done absolutely nothing wrong? Why they avoid eye contact, shift in their seats, start acting different the moment you walk in the room? It ain't always about what you said, it's what you represent. You carry truth, and truth has a way of making people flinch. Not because you're judging them, but because being around you shows them a version of themselves they've been trying to hide. You're a mirror they didn't ask for, a mirror they don't want. Because when you live with integrity, it exposes every lie they've told themselves. When you walk with peace, it reveals their chaos. When you show up consistently, it makes their excuses harder to believe. And they don't hate you for it. They hate the reflection. Because the second they see it, they're forced to confront the fact that they've settled for less. That they've been playing small, that they've been wearing a mask so long, they forgot what their real face even looks like. So instead of changing, they reject you, not because you're wrong, but because you remind them of who they were supposed to become. That's what makes this journey so lonely sometimes. You're not trying to be better than anyone. You're not preaching, not pointing fingers. You're just trying to grow, trying to heal, trying to walk with purpose and not ego. But even that is too much for some people to handle. Because growth looks like arrogance to the stagnant. Healing looks like judgment to the wounded. And when you start standing in your truth, it casts a spotlight on all the lies they've built their identity on. Suddenly you're the problem. Suddenly you're too intense, too serious, too deep. But all you're really doing is reflecting back what's possible. And that's terrifying to someone who's never given themselves permission to be whole. See, you didn't ask to be their mirror. You didn't force them to see, but the moment your actions, your energy, your presence start showing them what they could be if they stopped running, they either rise with you or resent you. And more often than not, they choose resentment, not because they don't want to rise, but because rising means letting go of the identity that kept them safe in their dysfunction. People say they want the truth, but what they really want is comfort. And the moment you disrupt that comfort, even unintentionally, you become a target. You become the problem friend, the difficult sibling, the changed partner. But let's be honest, they don't miss the old you. They miss the version of you that didn't make them question themselves. They miss the version of you that was easy to manage, easy to predict, easy to manipulate. But that version is gone now. You've done the work, you've looked your own pain in the face, you've owned your flaws, forgiven yourself, and started walking like someone who knows their worth. And that kind of self-awareness is rare. It scares people who haven't gotten there yet. They're still hiding behind pride, still clinging to the familiar, still pretending they're okay when they're not. So when you show up with light in your eyes and truth in your spirit, you don't just remind them of what they lack, you remind them that they have a choice. And nothing is scarier to the broken than realizing healing is possible, but it requires responsibility. You see, when people look at you, they don't just see who you are, they see who they aren't. They see the discipline they avoided, the healing they postponed, the courage they lacked. And because they haven't done the internal work, they project that pain onto you. They try to poke holes in your progress. They bring up your past. They downplay your growth. Also, they don't have to confront their own reflection. Because let's be real, owning your truth is hard. It takes guts. It takes losing people, disappointing expectations, walking away from comfort zones. And most folks aren't ready to pay that price. So they'd rather criticize your journey than start their own. They'd rather label you than change themselves. But that's not your burden to carry. You're not responsible for how your light makes others feel about their shadows. You didn't climb out of your pit just to crawl back in and make them feel safe. You're not better than them, you just refuse to stay broken. And that decision alone can make people treat you like a threat when all you've ever wanted was peace. This world will always have a way of punishing those who tell the truth simply by living it. You don't have to say a word. Your life will speak for itself. Your boundaries speak. Your self-respect speaks. Your refusal to play small speaks. And when people are used to relationships where nobody challenges them, where everyone plays along, your presence is jarring. You become the one who doesn't laugh at the wrong jokes, doesn't nod at the lies, doesn't enable their chaos. And that silence, that stillness, that self-assurance, it's louder than any confrontation. It's louder than any argument. And the ones who aren't ready to grow will mislabel it. They'll say you're cold, distant, arrogant, when in reality, you're just no longer available for dysfunction. You're no longer showing up as a version of yourself that makes others comfortable. You're not here to babysit people's insecurities. You're here to be free, to be whole, to be real. And that's going to cost you some people. But don't mistake that loss for failure. That's the price of being a mirror. Not everyone wants to see, but that doesn't mean you stop reflecting truth. At some point, you've got to accept that not everyone can walk with you, and that's okay. Your job is not to dim your light so others don't feel exposed. Your job is to keep shining, to keep growing, to keep showing up with honesty, with grace, with power. Because even if they don't thank you, even if they distance themselves, even if they try to break you down, somewhere deep inside, your presence planted a seed of truth, a seed of possibility, a seed of change. And that seed might not bloom today, might not bloom for years, but it's there. And when the time comes, when their soul is finally ready, they'll remember the way your mirror made them feel. Not ashamed, not judged, just seen fully, clearly, maybe for the first time. And by then you'll be long gone. Somewhere peaceful, somewhere brighter, somewhere free. Because mirrors don't stay where they're not respected. They move forward. They reflect light, not because they're perfect, but because they're willing. And if that's you, if you're the mirror, don't you ever stop showing people what's real. Whether they're ready or not, truth still stands. And so should you. You ever love someone just because it was in your nature to love? Not for gain, not for attention, not to manipulate or control. Just love, pure and unfiltered. Because that's how your heart was built. You loved with no strings, no scoreboard, no plan to collect favors later. And still, somehow, they pulled away. They questioned it. They twisted it. They looked at your love like it was a trap. And you sat there confused, asking yourself, why would someone run from something real? But that's the thing. Real scares people who've never had it. When you love without expectation, you take away the games they've learned to play. You strip the power from manipulation. You erase the rules they've been taught to live by. You say, I'm here, I care. That's it. And to a guarded, broken, or self-serving heart, that's intimidating because they've been loved conditionally. They've been praised when they performed, rewarded when they obeyed. So when you show up with love that expects nothing in return, they don't know what to do with it. They question your motives. They assume you're lying because they've never been held without being owned. Never been seen without being judged. You become too much and yet exactly what they need. They see your love and they panic, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your love forces them to face themselves. Your love shines a light on all the times they gave only to receive. smiled only to be accepted, held someone's hand only to get something out of it. So now when you walk in with open arms and no secret agenda, they get suspicious. They search for the catch. They test you. They hurt you just to see if you'll still stay. And even when you do, they still don't trust it. Because love like yours feels foreign. It feels unsafe, not because it is, but because it's unfamiliar. And people fear what they don't understand. So instead of letting it in, they try to tear it down. They push you away before you can get too close. They sabotage the connection just to maintain control. Because if they ever admitted your love was real, they'd have to admit everything they settled for before you was not. And that kind of truth is heavy. That kind of realization shakes the foundation, so they'll walk away. Not because they don't care, but because they don't believe they deserve to be cared for like that. You don't ask for anything back. That's what makes your love so powerful and so frightening. You don't need them to fill a void, don't need them to fix you, don't need them to complete you. You come whole. And that threatens the kind of people who are only comfortable when they had the upper hand. Because they're used to being needed, not wanted. They're used to love that comes from desperation, not abundance. And you don't need to be saved. You're not begging for love, you're offering it. That flips the dynamic. That changes everything. Suddenly they're not in control. Suddenly the usual emotional tricks don't work. They can't withhold affection to manipulate you. They can't guilt you into chasing them. You're not moved by power plays, you're moved by connection, by sincerity. And that unsettles them because now they have to show up as they truly are, vulnerable, honest, present. And that's something a lot of people aren't ready for. So instead of rising to meet you where you are, they try to drag you back down into a place where love has conditions, rules, and roles. But that's not who you are anymore. You're not playing games. You're offering something real. When you love without expectation, you become a mirror to every conditional relationship someone has ever experienced. You remind them of every time love came with limits. Every time they had to perform to be seen. Every time affection was earned and not freely given. So your love feels too open, too raw, too exposed. And because they've lived behind emotional armor, they mistake that openness for weakness. They think you're too sensitive. You care too much. You feel too deeply. But those aren't flaws. Those are strengths. Those are signs of a healed heart, not a fragile one. Because it takes strength to give when you're not guaranteed anything in return. It takes courage to be vulnerable in a world that keeps score. And your love, your soft, strong, honest love, is terrifying to someone who's only known survival. Because you're not just offering emotion, you're offering freedom. And that's scary to someone who's built their worth around being chosen, being wanted, being needed. You're saying, you don't have to earn this. You don't have to fix yourself first. I just love you here and now. And that breaks all the rules they've lived by. It sets them free. And freedom, though beautiful, can feel like chaos to someone still in chains. Some people would rather stay in toxic love than receive the real thing. Because at least with toxic love, they know the pattern. They understand the dance. But you bring a different rhythm. You bring stillness, safety, security. You don't pull, push, or punish. You give space, you listen, you stay when it's hard, and walk away when it's right. Not to hurt, but to protect your peace. And that kind of strength, that kind of love confuses people who only know love as a fight. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't yell, who doesn't beg, who doesn't chase. And the moment they realize you're not there to fill their emptiness, but to overflow love from your own fullness, they either rise or they run. Because your love doesn't feed their ego, it feeds their soul. And that's overwhelming. That demands growth, and growth requires surrender. So instead of surrendering, they push you away. They call you too much, when the truth is you were everything. You didn't ask for anything. You offered everything. But they weren't ready to receive what they didn't understand. So they left, not because you failed, but because your love required them to rise. The purest love will always be misunderstood by those who haven't healed. When you give from a place of wholeness, you confuse people who are still bleeding. When you say, I care, they ask why. When you say, I'm here, they say, what do you want? Because their version of love was always transactional, always calculated. But you love without keeping score. You don't offer parts of yourself, you offer the whole thing. And people who haven't found peace within will look at that and feel overwhelmed. Because now they have to choose, stay in their familiar pain or walk into unknown healing. And most choose the familiar. Not because it's better, but because it's predictable. But let me tell you something. You didn't love wrong. You loved fully. You gave the kind of love that transforms even if they couldn't accept it. You planted seeds. You watered hearts. And even if they walked away confused, deep down they felt it. They saw it. And one day, maybe not now, maybe not soon, but one day, they'll realize your love wasn't weakness, it was strength, it was truth. It was rare. And by then you'll be somewhere still loving, still full, still free. Because your love was never about what you could get. It was always about what you could give. Ever notice how people start acting different the moment you start growing? You're not being rude. You're not cutting anyone off. You're just choosing better, speaking clearer, walking straighter. But suddenly they're distant, short with you, cold. Like you did something wrong just by becoming more of who you're meant to be. That's the quiet truth nobody wants to say out loud. Your growth makes them aware of their stagnation. You're out here doing the work, changing habits, healing wounds, learning how to be better, and they're still stuck in cycles they won't confront. Still entertaining drama, still complaining about the same things, still pointing fingers at the world but never at the mirror. And when you start moving forward, it makes them feel like they're falling behind. Even if you never say a word, your progress speaks. Your peace speaks. Your confidence speaks. And for some people, that's too loud. It says you could be doing more, you could be rising too. But instead of using your growth as motivation, they choose jealousy. They choose resentment. Not because you outgrew them, but because they refuse to grow with you. And nothing hurts an insecure heart more than watching someone else walk out of a prison they've convinced themselves they can't leave. They don't talk about how lonely growth is, how painful it can be to rise when the people you love are content with staying the same. You start setting boundaries and suddenly you're selfish. You start protecting your time and now you're too busy. You stop explaining yourself and suddenly you're acting brand new. But the truth is, you're just not the same anymore. And you weren't supposed to be. Growth demands separation. It calls you higher. And the climb isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it means leaving behind people you swore you'd take with you, not because you don't love them, but because they stopped loving the version of you that chose to heal. They loved the one who stayed small, who stayed stuck, who stayed available for dysfunction. But this new you, this elevated, intentional, grounded version, that scares them. Because it means they have to choose too. And some people would rather lose you than face themselves. They'd rather make you feel guilty for growing than admit they've been standing still. And that's not your burden to carry. That's their discomfort to wrestle with. You just keep rising. You can tell when your growth starts bothering people, they stop clapping. They stop calling. They stop showing up when your name starts carrying more weight. Not because you changed, but because your progress holds up a mirror to their procrastination. Your discipline highlights their excuses. Your healing makes their numbness harder to justify. And people don't like being reminded of what they're capable of, but unwilling to become. So instead of asking how you did it, they question why you did it. Instead of learning from your steps, they criticize your path. They try to humble you, not because you're arrogant, but because your confidence makes them uncomfortable. And it's not your job to make them feel okay with staying the same. You didn't do the work to keep others from feeling insecure. You did the work so you could finally breathe, so you could finally feel free. And if your freedom makes them feel trapped, they've got healing to do. But you can't pause your journey for people who are afraid of starting theirs. You've carried them long enough. Now it's time they learn how to walk on their own. Even if it means walking without you. You outgrow more than just habits. You outgrow environments, conversations, expectations. You outgrow being the one who always understands while nobody understands you. You outgrow tolerating what drains you just to keep the peace. And when you start shedding all those layers, people notice. Some admire it, but others resent it. Because when you start showing up differently, it forces them to reevaluate how they show up. And if they're not ready for that level of accountability, they'll attack your evolution. They'll say you're doing too much when really they've just been doing too little for too long. They'll say you changed, but what they mean is you stopped making it easy for me to stay the same. Your growth didn't hurt them, it exposed them. And exposure feels like betrayal when you've built your life around comfort. So they label your progress as pride. They see your boundaries as walls. But what they don't see is the battles you had to fight to even get here. The nights you almost gave up, the strength it took to rise. If they knew the cost, maybe they'd stop questioning your price. But even if they never understand, you keep growing anyway. The people who once rooted for you will sometimes turn their backs the moment your growth outpaces their comfort. Because as long as you were in struggle with them, as long as your wounds matched theirs, you were easy to love, easy to manage. But when you started healing, when you started waking up with purpose instead of pain, they didn't know how to connect anymore. You weren't their misery buddy. You weren't available for the same old vent sessions, the same dead-end conversations. You started speaking life instead of staying in survival. And that shift made them uncomfortable. Because your light didn't just shine, it revealed. And revelation requires response. It forces people to choose. Rise or retreat. Heal or hate. And a lot of people choose the easier path. Resentment, not because you hurt them, but because your healing made them feel seen. And when people aren't ready to confront their shadows, they'd rather avoid your light. They'll make you the villain, twist your story, distance themselves quietly, just so they can stay unbothered. But growth doesn't need applause. It just needs truth. And if the truth about who you're becoming cost you who you used to know, that's a trade worth making. You didn't come this far just to make everyone else comfortable. You didn't fight through your storms just to tiptoe around people's feelings. You grew for a reason. You grew so you could breathe deeper, so you could love better, so you could lead yourself with clarity and courage. And if that unsettles people, let it. If your peace makes them restless, so be it. You're not responsible for their stagnation. You didn't ask them to stay behind. You invited them to come with you. But not everyone accepts that invitation. Some are more committed to their limitations than their transformation. And that's not on you. That's not your guilt to hold. You keep walking. You keep rising. Because every step you take forward is a step closer to your calling. And eventually the ones meant to grow will find their way. But until then, don't stop. Don't dim. Don't pause. You didn't survive just to stay stuck. You were meant to evolve. And no amount of silence, distance, or side eyes from those who stayed behind should ever make you feel bad for stepping into the person you were born to be. Keep going. They'll catch up. Or they won't. But either way, you're still rising. You've walked with me through this journey, and if your heart's still open right now, then I know this message was meant for you. Because the truth is, being kind in this world isn't always met with kindness. Sometimes it's met with coldness. Sometimes it's met with betrayal. And that can mess with your spirit if you're not grounded in who you are. You begin to wonder, why does my heart feel like a target? But listen closely. Your kindness isn't the problem. Your heart is not the issue. It's your light. It's the peace you carry. It's the way you show up in rooms without trying to compete. And somehow you still make people feel seen, or worse, exposed. And that can be threatening to those who've never learned how to handle someone who's both powerful and gentle. You're not hated because you're doing wrong. You're hated because you remind them of everything they're afraid to face. You're proof that healing is possible, that growth is possible, that love without expectation is possible. And people who've made comfort out of dysfunction don't always receive that message with grace. You're not the villain in this story. You're not the fool for being kind. You're the mirror, the light, the example, and that can be painful for people stuck in darkness they refuse to name. And you've seen it firsthand. People turning cold when you rise. Friends disappearing when you set boundaries. Loved ones doubting your shift, calling it pride, when really it's just you finally standing tall in your truth. But don't shrink to soothe their insecurity. Don't go dim to make their stagnation feel okay. Your strength is a testimony. Your growth is proof. And your peace, that's your reward. You didn't go through all that pain just to stay quiet and small. You made it through the betrayal, through the confusion, through the heartbreak. And now you're here, wiser, stronger, clearer. And every tear, every setback, every lonely step on the road was shaping you into the kind of soul who can stand tall, even when misunderstood. People will always have opinions about your path. They'll talk about your changes. They'll question your distance. They'll label your healing as ego. But don't you ever feel guilty for choosing peace. Don't you apologize for choosing to rise, because you were never meant to stay stuck just to keep others comfortable. You were meant to grow, to love, to shine, to build something real, even if it costs you a few seats at your table. The right people will find their way to your light, and the wrong ones, let them walk. Because you're not just being kind, you're being powerful in a way they don't understand. You're choosing not to match their bitterness. You're choosing silence over revenge, distance over drama, growth over guilt. And that choice, that's rare, that's sacred. So wherever you are right now, I want you to breathe deep, lift your chin, and remember, you are not the problem. Your kindness is not weakness. Your growth is not betrayal. And your peace is not up for negotiation. You're not here to play small for people who never plan to rise. You're here to walk fully in your purpose. So walk boldly, speak kindly, protect your spirit. And if they can't handle your light, let them sit in the dark. You were built for more. You were made to shine. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Keep going, keep rising. And never apologize for the way your soul was built to love.